The battlefield of the future may not announce itself.
It really rarely does anymore. I mean, the era where a formal declaration conflict gets delivered by an ambassador is pretty much history.
Yeah, or where you could physically watch columns of troops amassing on a border.
Exactly. It's just not how it works now.
And so that silent shift is exactly why we are plunging into this deep dive today. We are taking on a genuinely ambitious mission here for you, the listener.
We really are. It's a big one.
For the next little while, you and I, we are going to step into the roles of military historians, geopolitical strategists, and tech analysts all at once.
All three hats. I like it.
Right. We are going to completely unpack the highly complex and honestly somewhat chilling concept of the application of unrestricted warfare.
It's arguably the most critical security topic of our time. To borrow a framework recently laid out by India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh to military officers, the very character of conflict has fundamentally transformed. Well, competition and hostility now extend far beyond any traditional physical borders. We're navigating this massive rise in information warfare, artificial intelligence-enabled methods, endless proxy conflict,
Electromagnetic warfare too, right?
electromagnetic warfare, space domain challenges, and just relentless cyber attacks. The sheer scope of it is what makes it so incredibly difficult for a conventional military to grasp.
Let's ground this right away, because to a civilian, an active war today might not look anything like a bombing raid.
Not at all.
Like, I could wake up tomorrow and experience a sudden, catastrophic computer failure at my bank and just assume it's a glitch.
Which is exactly what they want you to think.
Or maybe there's a strange financial shock that inexplicably wipes out retirement savings. Or a highly inflammatory, completely false narrative suddenly trending on social media that triggers localized riots.
Yeah, or a supply chain disruption, where your local pharmacy simply cannot stock basic antibiotics anymore.
Right, it seems like a modern attack operates less like a loud explosion and much more like a silent systemic virus.
That is a deeply unsettling but, a very accurate way to frame it. The battlefield is essentially hiding in plain sight within the infrastructure of our daily lives.
Which is terrifying.
It is. The traditional boundaries that historically contained conflict, things like geography, uniform militaries, defined rules of engagement, they have been completely bypassed.
So if the battlefield is hiding in our daily lives, we need to understand the actual playbook being used.
Exactly. Which brings us to the core concept of unrestricted warfare.
I have to admit, the phrase unrestricted warfare sounds like a recipe for total apocalyptic chaos. It implies there are zero rules and just unlimited violence.
Right, and that is the most common and perhaps the most dangerous misconception out there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The term actually originates from a seminal 1999 Chinese strategy book titled Unrestricted Warfare, which was authored by two military colonels.
Okay.
And what is crucial to understand from that text is that the concept does not mean unlimited destruction.
So it's not about indiscriminately launching every weapon in the arsenal until there's nothing left but ash.
Exactly. It's not a nuclear free-for-all. The core philosophy is about using absolutely all available instruments to achieve your strategic objectives.
Ah, okay.
You seamlessly blend the military with the non-military, you integrate frontier technology, and you literally weaponize information itself.
So the lack of restriction is about the tools, not the destruction.
Spot on. The defining characteristic is the unrestricted use of measures, not unrestricted objectives.
I see.
The goal remains highly specific, like territorial control or economic dominance, but you completely remove the ethical, legal, or conventional limits on how you achieve that goal.
So it's highly calculated. I'm trying to visualize this, and my mind actually goes to martial arts.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, a brawler just throws a wild, exhausting knockout punch, right? That's conventional warfare. It's loud, takes massive energy, and it might miss.
Wow.
But unrestricted warfare feels more like a master who has studied anatomy, finding that one specific nerve pinch on a pressure point to completely paralyze a much larger opponent.
That is a brilliant analogy.
It echoes what Sun Tzu wrote centuries ago. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without ever actually fighting them.
That anatomy analogy captures the essence perfectly. In unrestricted warfare, the focus shifts entirely to identifying and exploiting vulnerabilities.
Instead of just matching force with force.
Exactly. Surprise and deception become your primary weapons. Instead of launching a single massive frontal assault, you launch highly integrated actions.
Targeting multiple vulnerabilities all at once.
Yes, targeting multiple vulnerabilities of a conventionally stronger opponent simultaneously. The physical battlefield hasn't disappeared, but it has sort of descended into the connected global domains we all rely on to function.
Like the internet and the stock market.
Right. The fight now lives in cyber networks, the global economy, financial systems, media ecosystems, technology supply chains, and even the satellites orbiting in space.
Wow. Okay, so if the warfare relies on striking those societal pressure points rather than clashing armies on a field, the profile of the soldier has to change completely.
It has to.
Because a traditional standing army can't fight a supply chain disruption with a tank battalion.
They absolutely cannot. So because of that, the participants have completely evolved.
Who are the participants now?
Well, adversaries are no longer just large, lumbering military forces waiting for orders. We are looking at a landscape where state actors, non-state groups, decentralized digital networks, technology communities, and even financial institutions become active combatants.
That's a huge shift.
It really is. Adversaries organize into very small, cell-structured units that are fully integrated into normal society.
They don't stand apart in a uniform.
Right, they blend seamlessly into the background.
And because everything is so interconnected, those tiny cells can trigger massive strategic shockwaves.
The leverage they have is terrifying.
Yeah.
Even small-scale tactical events can instantly generate strategic implications by manufacturing widespread shock, fear, and disbelief.
Can you give an example from the source material?
Yeah, a tragic textbook example cited in the Strategic Studies chapter comes from the conflicts in Iraq, where adversaries deliberately violated deeply held cultural sensibilities to create psychological devastation.
What did they do?
In one documented instance, operatives placed explosives under a disabled man's wheelchair and detonated it inside a police station.
Oh my God.
The text also notes reports of mentally impaired women being exploited as unwitting suicide bombers.
That is just, it's difficult to even process that level of cruelty.
It is horrific.
But I see the grim logic there. The explosion itself isn't the primary weapon. The primary weapon is the psychological horror.
Exactly.
It shatters a society's baseline sense of safety and decency far more effectively than a standard military engagement ever could.
The cruelty is the mechanism.
Huh?
It disrupts normalcy. And this concept of achieving massive strategic disruption without direct military confrontation extends heavily into the digital world as well.
Which brings us to non-contact warfare, right?
Yes. This is what strategists call non-contact warfare.
Taking down an opponent without ever sharing physical space with them, how does that practically play out?
The cyber domain is the ultimate environment for non-contact warfare. A foundational case study here, which the text highlights, is the 2007 cyber attack on Estonia.
What happened there?
Following a political dispute over the relocation of a Soviet-era monument, Estonia found its government, media, and banking websites completely paralyzed.
Wow, just shut down completely.
Yes, this was done through distributed denial of service or DDoS attacks.
For anyone unfamiliar, a DDoS attack is essentially flooding a network with so much fake traffic that it crashes.
Right, exactly.
Like 1 million fake customers trying to walk through the front door of a bank at the exact same second, preventing any real customers from getting to the tellers.
That is the exact mechanism. In Estonia, ATMs stopped working, news anchors couldn't broadcast, and government communications went completely dark.
That's wild.
It crippled the infrastructure of an entire nation, and not a single physical weapon was ever fired.
Jeez.
Or look at the rising use of malware and ransomware today. Adversaries freeze municipal water supplies, shut down hospital grids, and demand payment.
And the goal isn't just financial gain, is it?
No, it's to completely undermine the public's trust in their own institutions to keep them safe.
But cyber warfare is heavily used in active physical conflicts too, right?
Constantly. The chapter points to Israel's operations in the West Asia War.
Okay, what do they do?
Before commencing their main kinetic, physical offensive operations, Israel executed incredibly sophisticated cyber attacks targeting the electronic devices and communication networks of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran.
So they hit the comms before the troops moved.
Exactly. By paralyzing the enemy's command structures first, they achieved a massive strategic advantage before the physical fighting even started.
It really makes me think of a bank heist.
How so?
Well, instead of the robbers getting into a shootout and trying to shoot the tires of the police getaway cars, which is loud, messy, and draws attention,
Right.
they just hack the police cars' internal computers from a mile away so the engines refuse to start.
That's a great way to look at it.
The result is the same, but the risk is near zero. So if we take that logic to its extreme, could an entire nation theoretically be paralyzed without a single physical shot being fired?
If a nation has not meticulously secured its critical networks, absolutely yes.
Wow.
A coordinated, multi-pronged cyber offensive could theoretically shut down the power grid, freeze the financial sector, and blind the military's early warning systems simultaneously.
A nation could be functionally defeated before it even realized it was under attack.
Precisely.
Paralyzing a power grid is an overt act of destruction, obviously. But it seems an adversary could also slowly bleed a nation out without ever touching its infrastructure by weaponizing its wallet.
Oh, absolutely.
How do economic and financial methods fit into this unrestricted playbook?
They are the central pillars. In this framework, economies are literal weapons. Consider the global supply chain. A country that dominates a specific critical supply chain can exploit that dominance to exert severe political pressure. The geopolitical text uses China as a prime example here, noting they control a vast majority of the world's rare earth minerals.
And just to clarify for everyone, rare earth minerals aren't just for making neat gadgets.
No, not at all.
They are the foundational components for modern electronics, electric vehicles, and critical defense systems like the F-35 fighter jet.
Exactly the point. They are the bedrock of modern military and consumer technology. By suddenly restricting the export of those minerals, China can exert immense geopolitical leverage over a rival without ever deploying a ship or firing a missile.
The opponent is basically forced to concede politically or watch their manufacturing sector grind to a halt.
Right, but the U.S. utilizes economic weaponry constantly as well, particularly with sanctions.
Yeah, that's true.
A major case study noted in the literature is the U.S. action in 2018 against the Chinese technology giant Huawei.
What was the strategy there?
The U.S. imposed strict sanctions, restricting Huawei's access to vital 5G technologies, and simultaneously pressured allied nations to exclude Huawei from their own telecom networks.
Right, I remember that.
The U.S. also frequently engages in aggressive tariff wars, sometimes imposing up to 100% tariffs that heavily impact trading partners, including nations like India.
So this is the pure application of economic tools to achieve national security objectives.
Exactly. Furthermore, nations might engage in currency manipulation, deliberately altering exchange rates to trigger devastating financial crises in rival economies.
Okay, so we've established they can target the infrastructure and they can target the wallet. But targeting the mind seems significantly more insidious.
It is.
How do you wage war on public perception?
The information and psychological domain is where you fundamentally alter how a target population perceives reality. The strategy relies entirely on manipulating narratives.
Do we have a recent example of that?
The text highlights the 2022 U.S. midterm elections. Chinese government-linked accounts on social media platforms, specifically TikTok, were reportedly used to target specific candidates.
And the mechanism wasn't just spreading lies, right?
No, it was artificially amplifying existing controversial social issues to deepen political divides and erode trust in the democratic process itself.
We witnessed a massive surge of this during the pandemic, too.
We did, particularly with what analysts call China's mask diplomacy.
What was that?
During the height of COVID-19, China aggressively offered medical aid and masks globally. However, this was simultaneously paired with coordinated disinformation campaigns.
Designed to deflect blame.
Exactly, designed to deflect any blame regarding the virus's origins, while loudly criticizing how Western nations were failing to handle the crisis. It was a masterclass in shaping global narratives.
Wow.
Alongside this, the chapter discusses the concept of lawfare.
Lawfare. I'm trying to wrap my head around that term. How does a courtroom or a legal system become a battlefield?
Lawfare is the exploitation of a nation's legal and institutional weaknesses, or the manipulation of international law.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, an adversary uses international legal norms, treaties, and regulatory bodies to advance their own strategic aims. They tie an opponent up in international tribunals, file endless human rights complaints, or use commercial courts to freeze assets.
So it paralyzes the opponent politically and legally.
Right, preventing them from maneuvering, all under the guise of upholding the law.
Taking a step back, this is incredibly overwhelming for anyone listening.
It's a lot to take in.
Think about your daily life, the smartphone you just bought, the bank currently holding your life savings, the memes you scroll through while waiting in line for coffee, the legal system protecting your rights.
Yeah.
All of these are actually active weaponized combat zones. How on earth does a society defend itself when the weapons are literally woven into everyday commerce and communication?
That is the defining geopolitical challenge of our era. Because when international trade, global health crises, algorithms, and the law become weapons, the clear black and white boundary between peacetime and open conflict vanishes entirely.
So there's no more binary world of war or peace.
Exactly. Nations are now permanently pulled into what strategists call the gray zone.
The gray zone. That implies we are constantly operating in the shadows, hovering somewhere in the middle.
Right. Gray zone competition refers to aggressive actions that hover just above the threshold of normal, everyday peacetime competition.
But below open war.
Yes, deliberately calibrated to stay just below the threshold that would trigger an open, conventional military response.
How does a nation calibrate an attack to stay under that radar? What does that look like in practice?
The most glaring example cited by strategists is Russia's behavior leading up to the invasion of Ukraine, specifically the 2014 annexation of Crimea.
Ah, the little green men.
Exactly. Russia utilized proxy forces, those heavily armed soldiers wearing no identifying insignias. By keeping the operation highly ambiguous and officially denying state involvement, Russia successfully eroded Ukrainian control and seized the territory without triggering a massive coordinated military response from NATO.
Because if they rolled in with Russian flags on their tanks, it's an undeniable act of war.
Right, but by stripping the flags off, the international community spends weeks debating what to do, and by the time they decide, the territory is already gone.
Wow.
We see a similar strategy analyzed with China in the South China Sea.
They don't just launch a naval armada.
No, they use gradual military positioning, building artificial islands one sand ridge at a time.
Right.
They employ aggressive wolf warrior diplomacy and utilize debt trap economics, lending massive sums to neighbors like Vietnam and the Philippines for infrastructure.
Knowing they can't pay it back.
Exactly. Knowing they can't pay it back and then seizing the assets. They relentlessly advance their borders, but always just a fraction of an inch below the level that would cause a full-blown war.
So they are seamlessly blending conventional military posturing with digital tools, economics, and legal ambiguity.
Yes, and that seamless combination is defined as hybrid warfare. It is the synchronized use of conventional military methods, irregular methods, digital cyber tools, and psychological operations.
And a massive component of keeping this in the gray zone is the use of proxy warfare, right?
It is.
Basically hiring someone else to do the dirty work. But beyond just avoiding a direct fight, why do massive state actors rely on proxies, like militant groups or embedded spies?
The strategic text outlines three primary drivers. First, plausible deniability.
Right. If a militant group hacks a grid, the state sponsor claims ignorance.
Exactly. Second is strategic influence, or depth. A state can shape political events in regions thousands of miles from their own borders without the logistical nightmare of deploying their own troops.
Makes sense. And the third?
Third is simply cost avoidance. It is vastly cheaper to discreetly fund a militant group than it is to build, maintain, and deploy a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier.
There is a very specific, long-running case study regarding proxy warfare between Pakistan and India mentioned in the material.
Yes, it's a textbook example of asymmetric proxy warfare. Following partition, Pakistan realized it struggled to achieve its geopolitical goals through direct, conventional wars with India.
So they changed tactics.
Right. Consequently, they adopted a low-cost, high-payoff strategy. Military analysts often refer to it as the thousand cuts strategy.
What does that entail?
The literature notes that Pakistan funds, trains, and arms non-state militant organizations, groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, or Lati, and Jaish-e-Mohammed, JEM.
Okay.
They use these proxies to constantly destabilize regions like Jammu and Kashmir. The objective isn't to conquer India militarily.
What is it then?
The objective is to bleed the opponent economically, force them to maintain massive internal security deployments, and inflict psychological exhaustion.
So they're seeking strategic parity without ever risking a direct conventional war. It really makes me think of a mob boss hiring a hitman and paying them through a shell company. The damage is done, but the boss maintains total plausible deniability.
That's a very apt comparison.
But there has to be a limit. At what point do these thousand cuts force the defending nation to say, enough is enough, stop treating it as a proxy issue, and declare it a direct, open war?
Reaching that tipping point is incredibly dangerous, because once a defending nation decides to treat an indirect proxy attack as a direct act of war, they have to be entirely prepared for the fallout.
Right.
Taking that step requires a nation to take a brutally honest look at its own strategic vulnerabilities across every single domain we've discussed.
Because modern societies are practically built out of glass when it comes to these new weapons, right?
We are inherently vulnerable, specifically because our societies are entirely dependent on interconnectivity. Modern life relies on digital networks, energy grids, communication satellites, just-in-time global supply chains, and complex financial routing systems.
They are all linked.
Yes. If the power grid falls, the financial sector falls, the hospitals fail, and the supply chains halt.
A domino effect.
Exactly. This cascading vulnerability is why future defense strategies demand multi-domain thinking. You can no longer just protect your physical land, sea, and air borders.
You have to actively connect those physical spaces with space, cyber, the electromagnetic spectrum, and the information domain.
Precise.
But how do you even begin to reorganize a massive traditional military to think in all those domains at once?
It requires a monumental structural shift. China's People's Liberation Army recognized this necessity early on.
What did they do?
According to the analysis, they developed the Strategic Support Force, the PLSSF. The entire purpose of this branch was to centralize their capabilities in space, electronic warfare, and cyber operations.
Oh, so instead of the Army having its own cyber unit and the Navy having its own, they integrated it all.
Right, to launch synchronized multi-domain attacks. And alongside this digital integration, global think tanks remain deeply concerned about potential Chinese biological and chemical weapon reservoirs, which could be unleashed for devastating gray zone operations.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
How is the United States responding to that level of multi-domain integration?
The U.S. response is centered on heavily investing in a doctrine called multi-domain operations, or MDO.
Okay.
The Pentagon realizes that unrestricted warfare completely bypasses traditional platform-based military thinking.
Yeah.
In this new era, you can't just buy a faster fighter jet. You need an integrated network that seamlessly connects that jet with cyber defense systems, satellite intelligence, and ground forces in real time, allowing them to share data and strike vulnerabilities instantly.
I want to push back a little on the complexity of all this.
Right.
We spent a lot of time talking about incredibly intricate information operations, manipulating social media algorithms, planting false narratives, lawfare. But those strategies require deep, nuanced socioeconomic study of the target country to actually work. And they can fail.
They definitely can.
Take the Doklam episode between India and China discussed in the materials. China attempted massive information warfare to sway public opinion, but it completely failed.
Because of India's immense cultural and linguistic diversity.
Exactly. It made it impossible for a single monolithic propaganda narrative to take hold. There was no single pressure point.
That's a great example.
On the flip side, a biological weapon requires absolutely zero cultural understanding. A virus doesn't care what language you speak.
True.
Doesn't the existence of frontier tech and blunt biological weapons make all this intricate psychological manipulation seem almost overly complicated?
That is a brilliant observation, but it actually highlights exactly why unrestricted warfare is so lethal.
How so?
Because an adversary is not locked into one strategy. They have a menu of options.
Ah.
If they face a culturally diverse nation where propaganda fails, they simply pivot. They can choose complex psychological manipulation one day and blunt, devastating biological or cyber disruption the next.
So because the adversary can choose any weapon from any domain at any time, a nation's defense cannot rely on a single static shield.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the ultimate pressing question for everyone listening to this right now. How does a nation actually defend itself against everything, everywhere, all at once?
It requires building profound societal resilience. Success in this future landscape demands three interconnected pillars: defensive strength, adaptive capability, and an integrated national response.
Break that down a bit.
We need secure, hardened infrastructure that can survive a cyber strike. We need elite offensive cyber capabilities to deter attacks. We must achieve technology independence.
Meaning we can't rely on our adversaries for tech.
Right. You simply cannot rely on your primary geopolitical adversary to build the 5G networks your society runs on.
Makes total sense.
Furthermore, we need intense information awareness among the general public to resist disinformation. And our institutions must be prepared to act quickly and decisively.
Moving from theory to practice, What does that resilience actually look like in the real world? How is a country like India adapting to this, according to the text?
India is actively overhauling its approach. First, they've adopted a new three-pillar doctrine, which explicitly treats proxy war as a direct war.
Which is crucial because it rips away the adversary's shield of plausible deniability.
Exactly. Second, they are rapidly modernizing their physical borders with the Comprehensive Integrated Border Management System, or CIBMS.
What does that system actually do?
It replaces relying solely on human patrols with a network of smart fencing, thermal imaging, and ground motion sensors. It essentially uses technology to create an unblinking eye on the border.
Wow.
Third, they are drastically strengthening their cybersecurity infrastructure by empowering specialized agencies like CERTIN.
Which acts like a national digital fire department responding to cyber emergencies, right?
Yes, and the National Technical Research Organization, the NTRO, which develops cutting-edge technical intelligence.
Okay, that covers the physical and digital borders. But what about combating the ideological side? Like the proxy terrorism in Kashmir we discussed. How do you defend against an idea?
They are employing a highly sophisticated systems-based anti-jihadist strategy. They recognize that you cannot just shoot a radical ideology.
Right.
So they're leveraging academia to gain deep cultural and theological expertise. They work systematically to weaken the ideological appeal of extremist groups.
How do they do that?
They strategically amplify mainstream, moderate Islamic voices to counter extremist narratives and silence key radical ideologues.
Oh, that's smart.
They even utilize their own information operations, sometimes deliberately fabricating stories or heavily exaggerating the real tactical mistakes made by jihadist groups.
To sow paranoia.
Exactly, to sow paranoia and fracture the terrorist networks from the inside. They realize that it takes a network to defeat a network.
That is a fascinating, holistic approach to defense.
It is.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, how should we synthesize all of this? For the person listening on their commute or at the gym right now, we need a mental framework to make sense of this daunting new reality.
If you take away only one framework from our analysis today, let it be this. Future challenges will always be multi-domain, multi-actor, and multi-method.
Multi-domain, multi-actor, multi-method.
Yes, you will never face just one threat from one direction using one weapon ever again.
Wow.
To sum up the entire strategic philosophy of unrestricted warfare and our necessary response to it, the strongest system is not the one with only powerful weapons, but the one prepared for every form of challenge.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
From cyber attacks crippling entire nations, to the weaponization of global supply chains, to the insidious nature of proxy wars and psychological manipulation.
It's a new world.
It is. But building on that final quote about preparation, I want to leave you, the listener, with one last thought to ponder as you go about your day.
Let's hear it.
If our minds, our economies, and the personal devices sitting in our pockets are the literal new battlefields of unrestricted warfare, what does the word civilian even mean anymore? Are we all already drafted into the wars of the future without even realizing it?